At 11:47 p.m., my phone lit up the way truth does, sudden, sharp, and unforgiving. A text from my mother. "We've decided. You're no longer considered family. Don't bother coming to any gatherings. No phone call, no discussion, just a digital banishment, cold and final." Moments later, my sister Jessica hearted the message, turning betrayal into a collaborative act. I didn't cry. I didn't scream for an explanation. A strange, cold calm settled over me. I simply opened my laptop, pulled up every bill, every account, every automatic payment I'd been covering for them, and I started clicking cancel. One by one. By 12:06 a.m., their comfortable, curated world began flickering into darkness. When the final screen went black, the silence in my apartment felt heavier than the entire city sleeping outside my window. The refrigerator's hum, the quiet, methodical ticking of the wall clock, they all sounded like witnesses to the execution I had just carried out. I sat there, hands still on the keyboard, my heartbeat steady in a way that almost frightened me. This anger wasn't hot or messy. It was precise, clinical. For years, I'd been the silent financier of their family fantasy, the mortgage that never defaulted, my account, the car insurance that magically renewed, my credit card, every overdue bill, every manufactured emergency, every tearful phone call that began with, "We just need help this one time." I had covered it all. I told myself it was love. It was responsibility. It was doing the right thing. Now I understood with chilling clarity it had been a subscription service and I was the one paying for everyone else's access to a carefree life. I looked around my apartment. Everything was organized, labeled, color-coded, my lifelong coping mechanism for a childhood spent in emotional chaos. But tonight, that same impeccable order felt like evidence stacked against me. Every neatly filed receipt, every meticulously scheduled payment was proof of my own prolonged naivety. I used to believe deep in my bones that love meant endurance, that if I stayed quiet, kept giving, and made myself indispensable, they would eventually recognize that I was worth keeping. My mother had raised me on guilt, administering it in small, regular doses like a prescribed medication. My sister Jessica was the golden child, charismatic, charming, perpetually immune to consequences. My dad had simply survived by staying out of the direct line of fire. And me? I survived by making sure there was no fire to begin with, by pouring my own resources onto every spark. I remember the first time I paid their property taxes. They were facing foreclosure, their voices trembling with a panic that sounded genuine over the phone. I was 25, barely covering my own rent in a shared apartment, but I transferred the entire amount without a single question. Mum called me her guardian angel. I actually believed her. Then came the utilities, the car payments, Jessica's private university tuition, $22,000 per year, for 3 years straight. It's funny, isn't it? How angels always seem to end up paying the bills in someone else's personal hell. I rubbed my eyes, trying to summon some regret, but found only a vast, empty clarity. This wasn't an emotional breakdown. It was a financial audit of my soul. I wasn't losing a family, I was finally collecting the evidence. The last time I'd seen them was at a Sunday dinner 4 months ago. Mom had criticized my unambitious career choices in front of everyone. Jessica had bragged about her latest business retreat, which I knew was a luxury spa vacation, funded by what she called a small loan. Dad had made thinly veiled jokes about how I was too focused on work to find a partner. I'd smiled through the dry roast chicken and swallowed my truth with every bite. That dinner table had been a courtroom, and I just hadn't realized I was the one being judged. Now, sitting in the quiet blue glow of my laptop, I opened a new spreadsheet. I created 4 columns: date, amount, reason, proof. My fingers flew across the keys as if they'd memorized this path years ago. 1 column at a time, 1 line at a time, I was reclaiming decades of unpaid respect. Outside, the city lights blinked through my window like 1,000 silent watching messages. Somewhere out there, my family slept peacefully, believing I'd finally accepted my exile without a fight. They had no idea I was just getting started. By morning, my phone had transformed into a museum of missed calls. Dad, Mum, Jessica, each name glowing on the screen like an artifact from a life I no longer recognized. I didn't answer a single one. The silence between us had weight now. It was evidence. The first message wasn't even from my mother. It was from Jessica. "You're overreacting. Mum didn't mean it like that. Can we please just talk?" Talk. As if that word hadn't been carefully weaponized over the years. I read it twice, realizing with a jolt that there wasn't a single apology, just control, expertly disguised as concern. I deleted it and returned to my spreadsheet. Each line I completed was a memory converted into cold, hard mathematics. The exact date I'd covered Jessica's spring tuition. The $35 in overdraft fees from when Dad borrowed my card for groceries. The entire month I'd skipped my own rent to pay their home insurance. Every dollar was a story, and every story ended the same way, with me quietly cleaning up their mess. At 9:15 a.m., Mum finally emailed. No greeting, no apology, just a stark, demanding line. "We need to discuss what you've done. You've created chaos. Call immediately." Not a word about her midnight banishment. No mention of the exile. Just a demand to immediately resume my role as fixer, buffer, human safety net. For the first time, I saw it with perfect, painful clarity. The family I thought I was saving had never wanted salvation. They wanted an accountant. I typed back a single clean sentence. "I'm currently reconciling accounts. You should do the same." Then I pressed send. The phone rang instantly, the screen flashing with her name. I let it vibrate on the table until it went still. By noon, the digital panic began to spread. A text from Dad. "Can you please explain what's happening with the mortgage? Your mother's having a meltdown." Another from Jessica. "Why are you doing this to us? You're destroying everything." Destroying everything. As if my silence was the crime and not their initial casual betrayal. I opened my banking app, scrolled through years of transactions, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. The guilt that had been etched into my bones for a lifetime began to fade, replaced by something solid and sure. This wasn't hot anger anymore. It was precision. Cold, deliberate, and fiercely focused. By 3:30 p.m., they had tried every tactic in their emotional arsenal: anger, pleading, nostalgic guilt-tripping. Mom even posted a vague social media update. Some children forget who raised them once money enters the picture. Pride goes before destruction. It gathered dozens of supportive likes, mostly from relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years. I didn't respond, but I took a screenshot and filed it away. That was the moment the scales didn't just tip in the accounts, but in my very soul. For the first time, I understood that my silence could be my greatest strategy. At 6:45 p.m., I called Natalie. She'd been my rock since university and was now a fiercely competent family law attorney specializing in financial disputes. "I think I'm ready to stop being the family accountant," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. She didn't ask for details, just replied with 3 sharp words. "Send me everything." That night, I went through every email, every payment confirmation, every bank transfer, labeling, archiving, building my case from the ground up. The more I organized, the lighter I felt. By midnight, my digital inbox looked like a courtroom, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one on trial. By the second night, the quiet in my apartment had developed a rhythm, the kind of heavy stillness that comes just before a storm breaks. My laptop glowed in the darkness, a beacon of reckoning. Each open tab represented another year of unpaid gratitude: mortgage, insurance, tuition, taxes. They had built their entire comfort on the foundation of my silence, and I was done funding their peace. At 11:05 p.m., Natalie called. Is everything ready? Every receipt, I confirmed. Every single transfer. Good, she said, her voice all business. Then you're not asking for a payment, Olivia. You're enforcing it. She told me exactly what to write. A formal notice. Calm, factual, legally lethal. The subject line was, Outstanding balances Reynolds family account. The body was a simple, unadorned statement. This email serves as formal notice of reimbursement due for attached expenses. You have 30 days to initiate repayment before legal proceedings commence. No anger, no empty threats, just the truth, translated into the only language they seemed to understand. Business. When I hit send, the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was electric, vibrating with consequence. 12 minutes later, the first response arrived. Dad, let's be reasonable about this, Mum. How could you do this to your own family, Jessica? You've lost your mind. You're tearing this family apart. I stared at their words, steady, detached. Every message sounded identical in its refusal to acknowledge their own actions. They weren't shocked by what they had done. They were shocked that I had finally stopped participating. At 12:06 a.m., exactly 24 hours after it began, my phone illuminated like a digital crime scene. A cascade of calls, messages, voicemails. The panic had officially reached its peak. Turn the payments back on, Mum shouted in one voicemail, her voice cracking with a fear I'd never heard before. We'll fix this tomorrow, I promise. But their tomorrow had arrived, and for the first time, they were the ones left standing in the dark. Natalie's email appeared seconds later. Perfect. Forward everything to me. We're filing the formal demand letter by morning. I leaned back in my chair, watching the cursor blink over my name. Olivia Reynolds. It struck me then how many hundreds of times I'd signed that name to save them. On checks, leases, loan agreements, every signature had been a promise. Tonight, they had all become evidence. At 1:15 a.m., another message from Jessica lit up the screen. You think this makes you powerful? You're just heartless. Heartless. That word used to wound me deeply. Now it felt accurate, even necessary. My compassion had been a luxury they had overdrawn for years. I poured myself a glass of water, my hands perfectly steady for the first time in months. This wasn't revenge, this was accounting. Before finally logging off, I opened one final tab, the county property deed database. Their house, the one they boasted about finally owning, was still legally under my name. I'd never gotten around to transferring the title, part caution, part unconscious instinct. Now that instinct felt like a quiet, formidable power. By dawn, Natalie had sent the first draft of the legal notice. She ended it with a line that made me smile for the first time in days. They said you were out of the family. Let's make it official. Outside, the streetlights flickered off as morning arrived. Inside, my laptop glowed with a different kind of sunrise, one made of facts, figures, and a quiet, relentless reclamation. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel small or forgotten. I felt precise. The morning the formal letters went out, the world outside my window appeared utterly normal. Coffee shops were opening, traffic was beginning its familiar hum, sunlight climbed the slats of my blinds. But inside my apartment, the air was still, charged with the quiet tension of waiting for a verdict. Natalie had sent the demand package to each of them by certified mail and email. Every receipt, every dollar, every signature attached like exhibits in a trial. At 9:18 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was Dad. He never called first. Sweetheart, he began, that rehearsed, placating softness coating every word. This is getting out of hand. Let's keep this between us. As a family. I let the silence stretch between us until he began to falter. It is between us, I said, my voice flat. It's just finally documented. He inhaled sharply as if I'd struck him. You're making your mother sick with worry. Is that what you want? No, I replied, my voice steady as stone. She made herself sick. I just stopped paying for the medicine. Click. By noon, Mom's post hit social media, a long, convoluted wall of self-pity wrapped in moralizing. We raised her with nothing but love, and now she's turned against her own family for money. Pride comes before destruction. Beneath it, Aunt Carol commented instantly. Disgusting behaviour. I'd be ashamed to call myself her mother. Then, for the first time in years, other voices began to emerge from the digital woodwork. Cousins, uncles, people I rarely spoke to. Wait, didn't she save your house from foreclosure? One wrote. Isn't that the one who paid Jessica's tuition? Another asked. The carefully constructed narrative began to crack under the weight of simple, factual questions. At 1:52 p.m., an email arrived from Natalie. The subject line was, Additional Discovery. Attached was a PDF with screenshots of bank records I had never seen before. Natalie's note was brief. Confirming inheritance withdrawal, $45,000, signature mismatch, potential forgery. I read the line 3 times, the words not quite computing, the kitchen renovation, the marble countertops they'd been so proud of. The timeline aligned perfectly. My mother hadn't just passively drained my accounts through guilt, she had actively stolen my inheritance from my grandmother and forged my signature to do it. By that evening, Natalie had filed an injunction. The court froze their primary assets before they even sat down for dinner. That night, my parents tried every channel, pleading emails, furious texts, desperate voicemails, all repeating the same tired refrain. It was a misunderstanding. We'll pay you back, just give us time. Don't destroy this family over money. The irony was so thick it made me laugh aloud, the sound echoing in my quiet apartment. At 8:45 p.m., the doorbell rang. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. My mother stood there, her eyes red and swollen, clutching a crumpled envelope. Olivia, she whispered to the wood of the door. Please, we're losing everything. You have to do something for your sister. For Jessica? I asked, my voice neutral. Her lips trembled. She's still your sister, your flesh and blood. I opened the door just enough to hand her the paper already waiting on my table. A copy of the eviction notice Natalie had filed that morning. You'll receive the official copy from the court in 7 days, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. Her face lost all its colour, turning a sickly grey. You wouldn't. You couldn't. I already did. She stared at me, her eyes searching mine for the old version of her daughter. The one who fixed, who forgave, who financed. But that version was gone, erased by the truth of her own text message. Goodbye, Mum, I said and closed the door. I didn't watch her walk away through the peephole. I simply stood in the sudden profound quiet, breathing in the end of an era. By the next afternoon, the chaos began to unfold with methodical inevitability. Utilities were disconnected. Formal mortgage default notices arrived in their mailbox. Natalie forwarded a terse email confirmation. Title secured, eviction approved, probate court notified. Then came the online storm. Another post from Mom. She's suing her own parents. We are utterly devastated. This time the responses were different. Aunt Rebecca, who had always been quiet and factual, typed a single devastating line. You mean the lawsuit about the forgery? The one where you signed her name on the inheritance papers? The comment thread went dead silent. Hours later, my phone buzzed with an unknown number, a Chicago area code. This is Michael Torres from the Harrison Wells probate office. A calm, professional voice said. We're handling your late grandmother's estate. We've found some discrepancies in the beneficiary list. I gripped the kitchen counter, my knuckles turning white. Discrepancies? Yes, Miss Reynolds. It appears your name was removed and replaced. The signature on the amendment form doesn't match the one we have on file from your grandmother. The renovation, the luxury finishes, the sudden ability to take a European vacation, every puzzle piece clicked into place with a final sickening clarity. Thank you for letting me know, I said, my voice strangely calm. Please send all correspondence directly to my attorney. By midnight, Natalie confirmed the inheritance fraud filing. Another asset freeze, another layer of their deception exposed to the lights. In the days that followed, the story spread in quiet, shocked whispers through the extended family. One by one, relatives I hadn't heard from in years reached out via text and email. They borrowed from us too and never repaid. They did the same thing to my college fund. You're not crazy, Olivia. You're just the first one to say no. Every message felt like a rescue boat appearing in a flood I'd been drowning in for years. When the official court notice arrived via email, Natalie called me immediately. "They're going to try to contact you again," she warned. "They'll use a new tactic, remorse. Don't engage, especially if they apologize." The next morning, my inbox exploded again. Mum's new strategy was, as predicted, a masterclass in performative remorse. "We forgive you for all of this. Please find it in your heart to forgive us." Forgiveness as leverage, the oldest trick in the manipulator's handbook. I forwarded the email directly to Natalie and archived the thread without a second thought. By the week's end, the house was no longer theirs. The deed, still legally under my name, was sold to a young family within days. Natalie wired the net proceeds to my account. Watching the transaction confirmation appear on my screen felt nothing like the sweet thrill of revenge. It felt like equilibrium, like balance. Jessica tried one final text, a last gasping shot. "You won. Are you happy now?" I typed back my final words to her. No one wins when family becomes a financial transaction. Then I muted her number permanently. That night, the city outside my window flickered on, steady, vast, and beautifully indifferent. I sat by the glass, the same pain that had once reflected every sleepless night I'd spent worrying about them, saving them. Now it reflected something new. Me. Alone, yes, but finally, utterly unburdened. Somewhere out there, they were learning to live without me. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel a single pang of guilt for letting them. By the time the court finalized everything, weeks had passed in a strange, peaceful rhythm. Natalie sent a brief, final email. "Case resolved. Repayment agreement signed. Probate reversed. You're clear." Clear. The word felt foreign and utterly wonderful. Their accounts were frozen, their house sold, their debts legally tied to their own names for the very first time. The silence that used to haunt my apartment had transformed into a deep, resonant peace. I no longer woke to emergency phone calls or one more favor texts. My mornings belonged to me again. I used a portion of the recovered money to buy a small modern apartment downtown. Nothing extravagant, just clean walls, plenty of sunlight, and no ghosts in the corners. My friend Alex helped me move in. He didn't say much, just handed me a cup of coffee and smiled, as if he understood exactly what this kind of freedom tasted like. The first night there, I opened my old spreadsheet, the massive detailed ledger where I'd tracked every single dollar I'd ever spent on them. I stared at the final number for a long, quiet moment, and then I pressed delete. Watching the entire grid vanish into nothingness didn't feel like a loss. It felt like liberation. Word eventually reached me through the family grapevine that my parents were renting a small, modest house outside the city. Jessica was working a part-time job somewhere she despised. I didn't feel satisfaction hearing this. Just a vast, unbridgeable distance. They were finally, truly, living the life they had built, without me there, to support the facade. That night, for the first time in years, I slept straight through until morning. No guilt, no noise in my head, just the steady, quiet hum of a life that finally, completely, belonged to me. A month later, I visited my grandmother's grave. I placed a bouquet of yellow tulips, her favorite, against the headstone and whispered, "It's finished." A gentle breeze stirred the leaves of the old oak tree above, and it felt like an answer. Peace isn't loud or dramatic, it's quiet, it's steady, it's earned. If you've ever had to walk away from people who systematically broke you will understand this. You are not alone in that difficult, necessary choice. and you are not cruel for choosing your own peace. If this story resonated with you, explore our channel's Family Boundaries playlist for more true stories of reclamation and strength. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next chapter of someone reclaiming their life, one boundary at a time.